Good afternoon. This is Terry White, and you're listening to Focused on Business. First thing I need to do is ask you to forgive my voice, and I have a co-host today to help me with some of the questions, so we'll get through this. But Focused on Business is a show about and for small business owners. So if you're a small business owner and you would like to be featured on the show, give me a call at 505-938-3809, or you can send me an email to radio@sunwesttrust.com. This show is made possible by Sunwest Trust, and Sunwest is a self-directed IRA custodian. So they allow people to invest their individual retirement account in anything not specifically prohibited by the IRS. And so oddly enough, the IRS tells you what you can't invest in. They don't tell you what you can invest in. So they say you cannot invest in life insurance or collectibles. So that leaves it open to a lot of things. So if you have questions about that, feel free to give me a call at 505-938-3809. Today's kind of a special day. We have a guest, Solve Maxwell, who has had several businesses, I think he told me before the show. And then the main part of the show, we're going to be talking about blockchain and Bitcoin. So for those baby boomers out there like me that don't understand this at all, after this 45 minutes or so, you probably still won't understand it. But at least we'll know a little more about it. I also have a co-host, Chad, and hopefully Chad will be asking some of the questions so you won't have to listen to my voice. So anyway, Solve, thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here.
You're very welcome.
Tell us a little bit about where you came from. Are you a native of Albuquerque, or?
I'm not actually. I mean, it might as well be that I moved here in '93. I was a child, and my parents just found it beautiful out here. Came from Louisiana and Mississippi.
Oh, so that's unusual that they would think this is beautiful, because most people that come from a really green place like that think it's just too brown here.
It's an incredible contrast when you come from, where absolutely everything is green all the time and overgrowing constantly, to an entirely different landscape with a beautiful mountain. They just weren't used to it at all.
Yeah. Well, and I find the dirt, some of the dirt, like if you go up Highway 550, the different colors, the red and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, go on. So how old were you when you moved here?
I was 10.
10,
yeah.
Okay. Because 93, I was like 33 years old or something. So, so you went to junior high and high school here?
Yeah, even elementary.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay. So where'd you graduate from high school?
There's a small school. I was going to be Rancho High School when it first opened, and then I ended up closing out at a smaller school next to it at the time.
Was it a charter school? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I interviewed a guy yesterday or the other day that founded the first charter school here in New Mexico.
Wow.
And then now he's got like 4. It's really interesting.
That's awesome.
So I enjoyed that. So go on. So did you go to the university here, or?
I didn't. I actually went to. I got really interested in just recording audio and into music production, and I went out to Florida at a school called Full Sail, and got a degree there in audio engineering.
We should have called you in here to help us set this studio up before we did it.
That's what I used to do, actually. Yeah.
Cool. And so then tell us. You mentioned that you had several businesses. So kind of walk us through those, because the idea behind the show is to let people know that you don't necessarily have to get a job. You can create your own job, and sometimes if you're fortunate, it'll do much better than working for someone.
Right. And I see in the future, far away from now, maybe not too far away, the majority of, people working on something are going to be decentralized in a way, and actually you're going to have more entrepreneurs than you have, employees at particular businesses, and large businesses will have independent contractors and such. So it's definitely a hot topic and something that people need to wrap their minds around, I'd say. So businesses I've, started before that. I mean, I had a recording business directly out of that school. I got into apparel and fashion, and I started a clothing company, and I had a store downtown for a little while. And then I'd say just moving along throughout the businesses quickly, so we can get the blockchain and such. I got obsessed with coffee, started traveling to learn more and more about coffee, and conceptualizing cafes and customer flow and how cafes work and restaurants for that matter, how they operate. So my most recent venture before really diving into cryptocurrencies professionally was a small coffee shop down in downtown Albuquerque called Deep Space Coffee, which I eventually sold.
Mm. It was a cool place. In fact, the first, the first time we met you was at Deep Space Coffee, and I'm think of myself as kind of a coffee snob, and I actually have a great idea for a coffee shop. Let me tell you this and see what you think.
Okay.
Because there are so many ways to brew coffee. You can do pour over, AeroPress, French press, and I've told Chad this.
Hey, a few times, yeah.
Yeah. You should be able to go to a coffee shop and pick the whole beans and then take them back to your table and grind them yourself and then choose how you want to brew it and stuff. Chad said it would be a great place for a date, for a first date because you got something to do. And I don't know how many people would like that, but
Something active to do.
yeah.
Kind of like we went to a steak place out in California called the Strip Club, and you cook your own steak. So it's kind of the same idea as that, but it's get up out of your seat and actually enjoy the process.
Yeah. So if somebody out there hears that idea and does it, you got to send me some kind of royalty or something. So.
Yeah, I immediately, just to touch on that, I immediately thought of all the ways that could go wrong, and then I started to warm up to it. So, because you may, the listeners out there couldn't see the hand gesture you made, but it was of a hand grinder.
Yeah.
Which, depending on the hand grinder, could be, and just in general, is pretty low quality. And the grind is actually the most important aspect of making coffee.
Really?
People don't understand that. They think maybe the water temperature or how roasted the beans are or where they came from. But the grind, the size of the individual matter, that you're brewing, the particle size has to be extremely consistent and a very specific way for a certain brew method. And it's probably the most important part about making coffee.
Huh. So tell me, because I always pick on Starbucks, what do you think about Starbucks coffee?
What do I think about McDonald's hamburgers? So it's like, you have, a way to get coffee to the masses, and everything is supposed to taste uniform. And that's like trying to go, why would you go to all these fine dining restaurants and have the chef cook you something that every other chef was making exactly the same way? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And in this case, it's even more commercialized, and you're mostly drinking coffee products and not coffee there.
Yeah. Now that's cool. And what is really cool, and I hope our listeners can hear the excitement in your voice, but to me, the business owners that I've interviewed, the ones that were passionate about what they're doing, even like a roofer who's like, the roof has to be done a specific way and you have to know exactly what you're doing. And, one of the guys I interviewed was talking about roofs, and my eyes kind of glazed over a little bit because I don't know anything about roofs, but he was passionate about it and it had to be exactly correct. And I think we'll get into it, but I think that's what took you from the coffee business to blockchain and cryptocurrencies, because you just got involved in that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So actually, in my off time, when not at the coffee shop or not doing something coffee company related, I was definitely spending my time investing in or trading cryptocurrencies. And I had been doing that since, even 2011 is when I bought some Bitcoin for the first time, and just for a few bucks each. And then just held on to them and didn't know, there wasn't a lot to do with them at that point, but I love the idea behind having a currency that was decentralized, that I could move anywhere in the world to any other party at any moment for fractions of a penny at that time. And it wasn't controlled by any central bank or any third party. And that just, me being a bit of a revolutionary or someone that just wanted to do things differently, I was always looking at ways in where the government would change kind of its oversight in the future. And that was one of the ways where I thought that would be happening was within our monetary system.
So explain explain to our audience how that got started, because you talk about it being decentralized and nobody having control over it, but now it seems like somebody has control over it, and it is, because like I've been trying to get accounts set up with different exchanges for a couple of months now. So, I can't buy any cryptocurrencies right now because I can't get an account set up with anyone. So was it different to begin with, and has it kind of evolved already?
It's definitely evolved, but the fact of the matter is nothing really changed. So there are these exchanges online that have the ability to perhaps sell you some cryptocurrency. Most of them don't accept fiat currencies anyways. They wouldn't accept your US
explain
dollars.
explain real quick fiat currencies,
Yeah.
because you guys use that term a lot, and like somebody that I didn't know what it meant until you and I met.
Totally agree. Actually, I was with a group of CPAs, like 20 CPAs, teaching them about cryptocurrencies and kind of the angle they need to take with it in order to secure their jobs in the future. That's what they hired me to go speak to them about. And I brought up fiat, and they all looked at me blank, and I'm like,
Like it was some car or
yeah,
something.
and I'm like, I'm not
Hey, that's what I kept thinking.
like I'm in a room of CPAs that aren't familiar with the term, but essentially fiat, and the most easy way to explain it is currency issued by central banks or governments into monetary systems. And so the US dollar is a fiat currency, as is the Australian dollar or the yuan.
Or the London pound, or
Sure.
the England pound, or
Absolutely.
whatever it is. Okay.
British pound, yeah.
Okay. So the other thing, chime in anytime you want, Chad.
Yeah, sorry, I'm being a little quiet over here.
Yeah. The other thing is, can you explain the difference? Every time I bring up the term blockchain, the first thing people think of is Bitcoin. And they're related. Can you explain the relationship between those two things?
Sure. I mean, without blockchain, there wouldn't be Bitcoin, and without Bitcoin, there wouldn't be blockchain, because Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous character or characters, depending on how you look at it or think about it, presented the idea of Bitcoin. So the goal was to create a decentralized currency without any third-party control, that the individual users and participants had all equal control at all times. And this was an incredible benefit to society. But in order to do that, they needed to solve several different issues. And many cypherpunks and people developing cryptocurrencies at the time.
Let me stop you. Mini what?
Cypherpunks.
Well, I don't know what that is.
They're people really into cryptography and privacy.
Okay.
Let's just call it that. So
Okay.
early computer users, very concerned about cryptography and privacy, developing things. So the Satoshi Nakamoto needed to create a way in order for us to be able to use this new currency and produce something that would eliminate the ability for a double spend issue, which was if I send some currency or Bitcoin in this case to you, Terry, that I couldn't also send it to Chad, and at the same time, and claim that it was the same exact Bitcoin or unit of value, right? So in order to do that, there was this interesting code put forth, and that code creates a blockchain or a distributed ledger, and that allows the currency to actually operate correctly without any of the major issues that we were seeing in the early attempts at creating the same thing by many other parties.
So, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, so explain my understanding of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Is it some kind of a mathematical equation that backs it?
Sure, there's many mathematical equations involved. One is the finite amount, creating a deflationary currency. And then the other one, there's many different units of math involved kind of. So there's the law of code, that is implemented, which has a lot to do with math. And then there is just the algorithm itself that's inside of the blockchain. So in order to solve, so a blockchain, Bitcoin in particular, many blockchains can be different. Bitcoin's in particular is every 10 minutes or so, roughly, there is an equation put forth, a problem that needs to be solved. And the problem is, hey, I have all of these transactions that have fallen into this 10-minute block time. And I need some serious computing power out there to be able to really look into these different transactions and verify the fact that they're legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be a very tough problem to solve. And the block knows what happened already and can verify whether or not the transactions are legitimate as they're being solved. So the reason I bring that up is because I told you it had a 10-minute block time.
Mm-hmm.
This one in particular does, Bitcoin. And that one will make it more or less difficult as we're nearing the 10 minutes in order to produce a roughly 10-minute block time and not have someone solve it in 2 minutes or 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So is it kind of like a Rubik's Cube that you've got somebody who knows how to solve a Rubik's Cube, but you don't mess it up too much so that they can get it solved in a certain period of time?
Sure, perhaps. Or it's a Rubik Cube that has digital squares that allow you to get closer, but if you're doing it too quickly, it'll change a few more until you land at the right time.
Uh-huh.
That would be maybe a better analogy. And I really like that, actually, because no one's ever told me maybe it's a Rubik's Cube. And I like how pretty much everyone understands what a Rubik's Cube is.
Yeah.
And then this is a blockchain, and you can imagine like several Rubik's Cubes going along in a line. I really like that analogy.
So for blockchain in particular, the data that's in the block is the transactions that have taken place between you and I and Chad and anybody
Whoever
else
else.
out there. So right now, because of the huge surge of this, there may be thousands of transactions within that 10-minute period of time.
That's correct.
And so the blockchain, that's where I'm having a hard time understanding, because I talk to people and they say, well, you got to build the blockchain. So is that a software program that somebody's putting together so that it says seller's name and you put that in there, and then buyer's name and you put that in there, and this is how many units this person has bought?
Totally. So it's really about unspent amounts and then spent amounts. So you have, instead of a name, I'm sending from a public address, signing it with my private key, sending it over to your public address.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just sending whatever value it is that this data suggests. So that's what's interesting is, someone that's really up to date right now with Bitcoin would know that there's some serious fluctuations happening with the fees. But if I could just talk about maybe a couple of years ago, and also about how it will be in the near future again, and that is extremely low fees. So if I was going to send $1 across the world to anyone else's public address, it would have cost me maybe fractions of a penny a few years ago. And at that same exact time, I could have sent $40 million across the world to the same address for fractions of a penny, because the blockchain doesn't care what value amount we're talking about. It just cares what data amount is in the block. So as long as you're just paying a fee based on the amount of data is in your transaction.
Is in your transaction, or is in the block that happened within the 10-minute period of time?
Well, you're paying a fee on the data in your transaction. So is everybody else that's falling inside of that block.
So the more data that's in that block, the more money, the higher the fee would be for somebody who solves that mathematical equation.
That's correct. And that's really something you want to look at in the year 2120 to 2140. Right now, it doesn't matter. Those transaction fees are great, but miners are really after the reward of the block itself, which runs out at about those times I was just mentioning. So currently, when you mine a Bitcoin block, the miner that mined the block, or the group or pool of miners that mine the block, are rewarded 12.5 Bitcoin. And that goes for each block every 10 minutes. And that gets halved every 4 years.
This is just
But there's more transactions happening, so they're doing more work, but it's less of a fee.
Well, so as we go on, then we're going to see more and more transactions always occurring on Bitcoin's blockchain, hopefully, or some other blockchain. But they are getting those fees, you know, but they're also getting the block reward, which is typically larger than the fees.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand all that, but we're talking to Solve Maxwell, serial entrepreneur, started several businesses, and now is immersed in blockchain, Bitcoin, the whole cryptocurrency thing. And so we'll talk to him some more. And I have a co-host, Chad, with me today. So you're listening to Focused on Business, and some of you may not think this is really focused on business with what we're talking about, but we'll talk a little bit more in the second half of the program about how this is going to affect business, how it could affect business, which is the main reason I'm very interested in it and figuring out, trying to learn more about it. So we'll be doing that. Again, my name is Terry White. This is Focused on Business, and it's sponsored by Sunwest Trust. If you have questions about a self-directed IRA, you can give me a call at 505-938-3809, or you can send me an email at tlw@sunwesttrust.com, and we will be back in just a few minutes to continue this discussion. So we're back, and you're listening to Focused on Business. My name is Terry White. I'm the CEO of Sunwest Trust. Sunwest Trust is the company that makes this show possible, and they are a custodian for self-directed IRAs. So if you have an IRA that you would like to invest in something non-traditional, something other than the stocks and bonds, mutual funds, we can help you with that. So you can give me a call at 505-938-3809, or you can send me an email to tlw@sunwesttrust.com. And one other housekeeping thing is, if you are a small business owner and you'd like to be interviewed on Focused on Business, you can also call me at the same number, 505-938-3809, or send an email to radio@sunwesttrust.com, and we'll make arrangements to have you come in and interview you. We love talking to small business owners and find out how they got started and where they came from. So today we're talking to Solve Maxwell. I have a co-host, Chad, who's going to help me out and ask more questions this half of the show. But we left the last segment talking about Bitcoin and blockchain. And the first question I have, Solve, is we hear about Bitcoin all the time. And Chad was mentioning on the break that, you mentioned that you started in this in like 2002?
2011.
2011. Okay. So that was, it's getting longer. It's like 6 years ago. I just heard about blockchain and Bitcoin maybe a year ago. Mm-hmm. So how did this grow so fast? So, it seems like to me it was kind of a quiet thing for maybe 3 or 4 years. And then now all of a sudden I hear about it on CNBC and Fox Business and everything every day.
My wife, I go home and my wife tells me she saw it on, the Today Show. And so it's blown up.
More mainstream now. You hear about it at least.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would imagine most new technologies experience the same sort of thing. The internet, for example, how many people were working behind the scenes, with the internet. I can think of just like the two colleges, I think it was like UCLA and MIT, like regularly working back and forth. Forgive me if I'm wrong there, but definitely the world wasn't raving about the internet, even 4 years after its inception, right? Or conception, excuse me. But when you think about, so from speaking of conceptualizing the internet, when Bitcoin was conceptualized in 2008, the next year, 2009, is really when the first Genesis block was mined, right? And then from there, it took a while. And I was, like I'm talking about, the cypherpunks or the people into cryptography were discussing it on forums. And beyond that, you didn't have anybody talking about it ever. You had people just thinking about maybe a new decentralized future or a way to do things, or maybe decentralized applications, or, just how the blockchain technology was working in general. Then, several years later, what you saw was many people, you saw money drive it, because all of a sudden there was many more tokens being born because of this new standard that another blockchain called Ethereum put out. And once that put it out, once that created a blockchain, it had a standard built on top of it, which was the real revolution, called an ERC20 standard. And that is just the ability to execute your own token, which Bitcoin ultimately is, on its blockchain called Ethereum. And it made it really easy for anybody to do, which is very interesting. And all of a sudden, it became really popular, and you saw the birth of companies launching their own token and as a way to crowdfund. And then all of a sudden it was everywhere. That's when you started seeing this company raised this much money, and at least this much money in USD value when weighed against this cryptocurrency, or weighed against Bitcoin is what you usually see. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden, it was a popular way to raise money. Everybody wanted to jump on board. And then you had exchanges come about, and, exchanges were instrumental in allowing people to become liquid, or allowing the market to become liquid. And in order just for more money and different money to diversify into other coins, especially from the perspective of an investor.
So before the exchanges came along, how did when you first bought your first Bitcoin and there wasn't a Coinbase or a Gemini or some exchange, how did you buy those first Bitcoins?
There was a couple of different ways back then, or there was a few. So I bought some from a friend that was building a website for a record label I started. Started the record label back in 2006. By the time 2011 came around, I needed a revamp on the site. Had a bunch. The project I was working on had grown a lot. I was looking for developers, or looking for someone that could build a new website. I found a couple of interesting guys that were coming around the shop that I had at the time. And, as they're building the site, they also were, building Linux computers for their other friends so they could anonymously surf the web and all these sorts of things. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Teach me more about this stuff. It's so interesting. And they're like, yeah, you don't know about Bitcoin? And I'm like, I don't, tell me about it. And they're like, well, explain the entire process and what Bitcoin is, similar to what we were discussing earlier in the first half. And then, I'm like, okay, well, let me buy some. And then I went all out. I wanted to start up a mining rig at my house. I had a little bit of cash set aside. I wanted to spend it all on computers. I met with them several times about it, and they talked me out of it. Mm. Which was interesting, because I have no idea where I'd be now if I would have got into that at that time. It would have been extremely lucrative. However, I didn't step out of it, right? So I instead just started investing in the token itself a couple of years later, mm-hmm. right? It took me a little while to sit on it and think about where this is going. But eventually, Bitcoin started to grow, and I just started putting more and more money in. Just go do jobs or work, or get money from whatever my earnings were from businesses, and put them, but directly invest in Bitcoin.
But before the exchanges, you were having to go to individuals,
right? Yeah,
who somehow got Bitcoin.
So we were talking about 3 different ways at that moment. So, buy it from peer to peer. There was this website called localbitcoins.com, and they just were a platform to allow people to come together in person to buy Bitcoins from others. There was also people selling it on the marketplace that existed back then. It was called the Silk Road. There was this dark web marketplace where you could buy anything, and you're going to hear crazy, terrible stories
Yeah.
about that. But that was one way to buy them. People would sell them to you electronically on there. And then, custodians came about, like Coinbase, and they were a money transmitter here in America, allowed to sell you Bitcoin, for US dollars. And if the other way Bitcoin's come about is by mining it. So there was people mining Bitcoin to put it into existence, and there were people buying Bitcoin from people that owned it from the miners.
So
Can you speak a little bit about the mining? Yeah, I think that it's a pretty hard concept to understand, I think. So maybe you can give a little bit of background about what a miner is and what they do and what part they play in this whole process.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's users of the network, and then there's protocols, and there's miners. So miners are running these video cards. Let's just say miners are utilizing computer power, as much as possible, as much as they can afford or put together and operate correctly, to solve these problems that the blockchain itself puts out in order to demand that you verify all of these transactions are legitimate. That's when we get back to that. So they're people that use massive rigs of computers to use that computing power in order to put forth the effort to solve a block in order to receive the blockchain reward for each new block. And so that form of consensus in the system is called proof of work. And so what they're actually doing is, they're not creating Bitcoin out of thin air. They are solving a very hard issue or a very hard problem with serious computing power and plenty of electric consumption.
So is this blockchain, is that a program that runs like autonomous from I don't know if that's the right word or not, from someone? It's just a program that's running and accepting all this data and then putting it in and creating this problem to solve. So is that, I guess my question is this, what was the guy's?
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Satoshi Nakamoto. So he came up with this white paper that laid all this out
That's right.
from like including the blockchain and everything, or did he just lay out the idea of the Bitcoin? And then
No, it was
somebody else-
everything.
It was
like,
everything.
this is how it works. This is why it works. Here's a blockchain, or distributed ledger. And, if you act as a node, I'll be the first node and I'll start mining. And if you act as a node and you mine too, then we can make sure that the transactions taking place, at least between you and I, are legitimate. And then, you start, and then you have this network that starts forming, and you had one node, then two nodes, then, all of a sudden 100 nodes, then thousands of nodes, and now, really massive network of nodes, which are just computers running a backup copy of the blockchain, so they can be on the same page as everybody else at the same time to verify that the transactions that are happening on the network are actually legitimate, and therefore it can act as a decentralized.
So that's the value of it, and that's what keeps it from being hackable, is that you have these thousands of nodes out there that have the same information. Each node has the same information.
That's right.
So if somebody tries to change the information in one, then it doesn't match the rest of them, and it's kind of a
and it's rejected.
majority rules.
That's exactly correct. It would be rejected if the rest of the nodes didn't agree.
Okay.
And if you can't hack Bitcoin, no one has the ability to hack Bitcoin. You could hack a node or someone, and you can hack someone and steal their Bitcoin if they're or if they're not responsible for the way that they're storing their Bitcoin. Then you could hack them, but the network can't be hacked, and that's what makes it so incredible. You can't even stop it. Satoshi Nakamoto himself couldn't stop Bitcoin. There's no way to do that. Once a blockchain is born and shared on more than one computer, good luck.
You'd have to like shut down every computer in the world.
You'd have to
all at
shut
one
down,
time.
the internet itself, probably electricity, and someone that's good at Morse code could effectively transfer value as well. So
Yeah.
it's pretty impossible to stop.
Huh. It's way above my head. I mean, I'm I'm sitting here thinking this doesn't even make sense to me. But what's amazing to me is how it even got started. I mean, to try to get two people to work on something and then a third person and a fourth person, and now you have
Right.
hundreds of thousands or millions. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was presented in a cryptography forum, and someone else was like, this is interesting. I like this, actually. I read the white paper. How are you going to solve this issue? Well, I solve it this way. Well, yeah, but how are you going to solve this one? Well, perhaps you should write an improvement protocol that helps that. Okay, I'll do that. And then you just had all these core programmers, come together and just start making it better at all times. And what we
And
have
these guys
today,
are all basically doing this for free.
yeah, they're all volunteers.
Yeah. Or are they getting Bitcoin for doing that?
I mean, no, the core team is
They just
volunteers.
get the benefit of saying, I did that.
The better, well, I
and
mean,
then it's a better program or a
Yeah.
better system.
yeah, the better it
altogether.
is, the more valuable it is, and they surely hold a lot of the currency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole, what is that software, open source kind of thing, where anybody can just go on and create something.
This
Or add
is
to it.
that, but you would also have to have everyone else agree with you, or you'd experience what's called a fork, and the blockchain itself would essentially clone itself, where it would break apart and become two different chains, and they would share a history from the chain point in which it broke. But going forward, they would have their own set of rules and their own sort of thing, and even their own token. And that's what you have today with like Bitcoin Cash showing up in your Coinbase wallet all of a sudden. That's because that was a fork that took place between some really prominent people that wanted Bitcoin to do a certain thing and be a certain way. And the core group disagreed with that. And so you had a fork happen.
So it's kind of the idea that the stronger one will survive and the other one will kind of fall off, or they'll kind of move just parallel, or
Any of
or
those
both?
things could
Okay.
happen. Yeah, I mean, so they could be parallel. We could use one for one reason and the other for the other, because they actually, they have different utility.
I think that's what worries people about investing in Bitcoin is, there's all these, there's not one answer. Like all these different things could happen. It's not like the sun's going to come up tomorrow, because you don't know if somebody's going to disagree and it forks off and something else happens. Whenever you mention Bitcoin, at least my experience has been, whenever you mention Bitcoin in front of a stockbroker or something, they're always really quick to correct me in that it's not an investment in Bitcoin, it's speculation in Bitcoin. And I think that's kind of self-preservation for them.
Yeah, because I disagree with that. In fact, I think it's a conversion of money.
Yeah.
I have one monetary unit, a fiat unit known as the U.S. dollar. Am I more comfortable with my U.S. dollar, or would I rather have that in Bitcoin? Going forward, I'd rather have that in Bitcoin. I don't want U.S. dollars.
Well, except you can't buy any, well, you're going to correct me.
I
think,
am,
but,
yes.
And let me put it this way. Why would you want to buy anything with Bitcoin? Because the value is so sporadic, so volatile.
Right. Going forward, it would become less volatile after we see more of a conversion take place where people want to live on cryptocurrencies instead of this old money, and so that'll be a beautiful time when it's like very obvious no one accepts U.S. dollars or fiat currencies from around the world. They only accept cryptocurrencies. That day will come. And even if the U.S. dollar itself is a cryptocurrency, because it makes more sense for our normal monetary system to also run on a blockchain. It's more secure, and it allows us to transfer it anywhere instantly without a third party. So it just makes more sense for us to have a peer-to-peer cash system. And so I just would rather I'm betting and going long on cryptocurrencies as a whole, and specific ones in general, or ones I've never heard about because they don't exist yet. I love the technology and I love the potential that it has in absolutely disrupting the way that our entire world thinks about money.
So that brings up my next question about there's more than one. Bitcoin is one cryptocurrency. Do you know how many cryptocurrencies there are out there?
Yeah, there's a few thousand.
A few thousand. And so companies issue these coins or tokens to raise money. So why is that different than a company issuing stock to raise money, or is it?
Because when you issue a stock and you raise money, you're now public, or you're at least owned by the people that own that stock. That's a security in the United States and many other countries, and it's also equity. So when you release a token, you could release an equity token, and security tokens are going to come, and they're going to be huge. And there's a new standard for that, which was presented by this organization called Polymath. So look them up and check out what they're doing, because they're essentially moving, their market is trillions of dollars being able to be tokenized and moved in a different way than securities have ever been before. But if I launch a company and have what's known as an ICO, or perhaps a pre-sale utilizing a simple agreement for future tokens, then those tokens go out to the buyers, but they don't represent ownership in whatever project I'm doing or the company that I'm working a part of.
So the difference between stock is if I issue stock, the people that buy that stock have an equity position in my company.
That's right.
But if I issue tokens, they don't have any equity position in my company. They have a token that's backed by the market.
Right. So it could be an equity token as well.
Okay.
What we're mostly seeing is not. What we're mostly seeing right now is utility tokens. So the token that they're issuing is a native token that operates in their software or whatever project or product they're putting out. The token will have utility within that product. So you'll be able to use it as almost like an in-game currency or something that you would do in a video game, but instead it's for their platform, right? So in the future, you're going to have Amazon bucks or whatever it is, or Amazon token, and they perhaps will offer a discount when utilizing their tokens, or perhaps they'll just try to eliminate any other thing in general and use only their tokens when you're on their system. That's what you're using. Mm-hmm. There's really easy ways to exchange and move back and forth between different tokens. So there isn't necessarily any harm in them wanting to do that.
So I have to understand, I have to put this, we're running out of time, but I have to put this in terms that I understand.
Okay.
So them giving this utility token is kind of like chips at a casino in Vegas, where I can only use those chips in that casino. But I can trade them in for something that can get me chips in another casino later. Or I may even be able to, when I go to a casino, I may be able to use them, but they'll immediately exchange them for their chips.
I like this analogy because I'm working on something very similar right now. Not this exact same thing. But without going into that, you can transfer them still anywhere. I might want to buy Amazon tokens from you, and I might live in some country, completely on the opposite side of the globe, and you'd be able to exchange that value with me very quickly for some other token that I had or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could use them in Amazon, but perhaps somebody else in some other organizations accept those tokens as well. What these companies are doing is creating their own economy and allowing that economy to have utility on their own network or platform, which is liberating.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Very interesting. Yeah.
We are already out of time, and we didn't even get to talk about blockchain and how that's going to affect businesses and stuff. So I would love to have you come back sometime. I know you're really busy, but maybe we could get you back and forget all this and focus just on how blockchain is going to change everything as we know it. I think
That's right.
Maybe you can
Seems that way.
tell me if that's the truth or not
Yeah.
in our next interview. So appreciate you being here, Chad. I appreciate what little help you gave me, but hopefully people's throats won't hurt too bad listening to this. But this has been Focus on Business. My name's Terry White. I'm the CEO of Sunwest Trust, and we'd love for you to tune in again next week when we have another exciting, interesting interview with a small business owner. Thank you very much for listening.